dramatic shakeup. The Trump administration has torched a 30-year-old trade agreement that slapped a 17% tariff on fresh tomatoes from Mexico.
The U.S. government announcing a new 17% tariff on most fresh Mexican tomatoes.
Tomatoes. A new policy kicks in today, making way for a 21% price hike on tomato import.
If you weren't paying close attention, it all happened almost instantly. What looked like a minor regulatory adjustment quietly turned into a major disruption. There were no dramatic announcements or urgent warnings. Instead, the change arrived through technical updates, inspection notices, compliance language, and policy tweaks that usually go unnoticed. But within days, the effects became impossible to ignore. Shipments slowed, then stopped altogether. Trucks loaded with fresh produce sat idle at border crossings. At border points where timing is critical, delays didn't just cause inconvenience, they disrupted everything connected to them. Canada's move officially linked the concerns about pesticide residue and repeated quality issues seemed like a routine safety decision on the surface. However, its impact went far beyond regulation. It shook a highly interconnected agricultural network built on trust, timing, and reliability. In cross-border trade, consistency is everything. Once that stability is disrupted, the consequences spread quickly. Within just 2 days, the scale of the disruption became clear. Dozens of tomato shipments from California were stuck at major crossings, unable to move forward. Each truck represented more than just produce. It carried contracts, delivery commitments, and financial expectations already in motion. This trade supports hundreds of millions of dollars annually, and thousands of farming families whose livelihoods depend on uninterrupted access to markets. When that flow breaks, the impact spreads rapidly across the entire system. The timing of the decision made it even more significant. While American farmers were still trying to understand what had changed, Canada had already taken steps to secure alternatives. Agreements worth roughly $180 million were made with greenhouse producers in regions like Ontario and British Columbia. These were not short-term fixes, but part of a broader plan to strengthen domestic production. In simple terms, demand didn't disappear. It shifted. This signaled a strategic move toward controlling supply internally rather than relying heavily on imports. For farmers in California's Central Valley, the effects were immediate. Crops that once had reliable buyers suddenly had nowhere to go. Systems built around predictable demand began to fail under the pressure. For many growers, the issue wasn't quality. It was the reality that their market had moved on. At the same time, another development was unfolding further south. Mexico stepped in quickly to fill the gap, backed by larger-scale investment and long-term planning. Billions of dollars were directed into modern agricultural systems, including greenhouse and hydroponic farming in key regions. These advanced systems allowed for year-round production with significantly lower water usage and greater efficiency. Infrastructure improvements, such as upgraded transport routes, better storage facilities, and enhanced logistics, strengthened the entire supply chain. Additional funding supported workforce training and agricultural research, creating a system designed for long-term growth. The results became clear. In a short period, Mexican-grown tomatoes began reaching international markets at lower prices than American exports. But cost wasn't the only factor. Buyers increasingly prioritized reliability and consistency, even if it meant moving away from long-standing suppliers. This marked a major shift in how agri-trade operates globally. Back in the United States, the effects spread beyond farms into entire communities. Agri-food towns began to feel economic pressure as processing plants reduced operations and transportation companies scaled back. Local businesses that relied on farm income experienced declining demand, creating a ripple effect throughout the economy. Economists refer to this as the multiplier effect. When income is lost at the farm level, the impact extends to other sectors. In many cases, every dollar lost removes nearly twice that amount from the surrounding economy. This became visible through rising unemployment and reduced economic activity. Families began relocating in search of stability. Adding to the strain on local communities, public services were also affected. Schools faced budget cuts due to declining populations. Healthcare facilities already operating under tight financial conditions. Reduced services, property values dropped across key agricultural regions, reflecting both immediate financial losses and long-term uncertainty. Because while markets may recover, rebuilding confidence takes much longer. At a broader level, this situation highlights a deeper transformation in agriculture. It is no longer viewed simply as a commodity sector. It has become part of a larger strategic framework that includes supply chain security, resilience, and geopolitical considerations. Recent global disruptions have shown how fragile supply dependencies can be. As a result, countries and industries are focusing more on reducing risk and gaining greater control over essential resources. Diversification is no longer optional, it is necessary. Technology has accelerated the shift, creating a growing gap between traditional farming and modern production systems. Advanced greenhouse operations rely on real-time data automation and predictive models to match production with demand. This reduces waste, increases efficiency, and lowers costs over time. Hydroponic systems, for example, can produce high yields using far less water than traditional farming methods. They also require less labor and are less affected by weather conditions. When combined with advanced logistics, these systems create a strong competitive advantage. Meanwhile, traditional agricultural infrastructure is facing challenges. Processing plants, rail systems, and distribution networks that once operated at full capacity are now underused. This increases costs and reduces efficiency. Transportation companies are also feeling the impact, with fewer shipments leading to lower margins and underutilized equipment. Retailers and distributors have adapted quickly. Instead of relying on long-standing supplier relationships, they now prioritize consistency and cost-effectiveness. This shift is gradually changing what consumers see in stores, and what they expect imported produce is becoming more widely accepted. As long as it meets quality standards and remains available. As these changes continued, the system entered a new phase. Rather than correcting itself, it began reorganizing. Trade routes shifted, supply chains adjusted, and new patterns began to emerge. Data shows that imports into Canada are increasingly coming through new channels, while exports from Mexico have risen significantly. This indicates that trade is not collapsing, it is evolving. At the same time, broader trade tensions have added complexity. Tariffs and policy changes have made the system more expensive and less predictable. Efforts to protect domestic industries sometimes clash with market realities, especially when supply still depends heavily on imports. In response, exporting countries have adapted by adjusting pricing strategies and expanding into new markets. This has allowed them to maintain stability even as conditions change. Within the United States, these shifts are now affecting both businesses and consumers. Analysts expect moderate price increases, forcing companies to adjust sourcing strategies. Instead of choosing based on preference, businesses are focusing on availability and reliability. This reinforces a cycle where demand shifts toward the most dependable suppliers. At the same time, a structural gap continues to widen. A large portion of greenhouse-grown tomatoes consumed domestically is imported, highlighting the difference between traditional farming systems and more advanced production methods used elsewhere. The result is a system moving in two directions. One side is trying to stabilize existing structures, while the other is building a new model based on technology efficiency and evolving demand. The longer this divide continues, the more difficult it becomes to reverse, because supply chains don't wait, they adapt. This raises important questions about the future. If a widely consumed product like tomatoes can be reshaped so quickly through policy decisions and investment, what might happen when similar pressures affect other essential crops? And more importantly, is this just a temporary disruption or the beginning of a much larger transformation? At the same time, broader economic developments are adding to the uncertainty. Canada is preparing for potentially complex trade discussions with the United States. A new advisory group has been formed to guide decision-making during this period. This group includes political leaders, industry experts, and representatives from key economic sectors. Its purpose is to bring together different perspectives and create a more coordinated approach to trade relations. The inclusion of voices from multiple sectors reflects the complexity of modern trade challenges. So the real question is, are we seeing a short-term disruption or the early stages of a deeper transformation that could redefine how food systems operate in the future? What do you think?